Welcome to Sauder TV. I'm Phil Weinzimmer, a journalist for Sauder, also an author of the Strategic CIO and consultant. And I also speak at many IT executive events. IT strategy is a big issue today, and disruptive technologies is a subject that we want to address in today's interview with Joe Bruhin, who's the former CIO, the Chief Information Officer at Constellation Brands, the multinational beverage company. Joe, welcome to Sauder TV. We're looking forward to all your insights. So you've had a very successful career in IT, and as the former CIO of Constellation Brands, it must have been an interesting and exciting journey. Tell us a little bit about that journey and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, you know, Phil, I have indeed had a very fortunate career, lots of opportunities. I've had the privilege to work for some great companies. I started off at the Hartford Insurance many years ago in Hartford, Connecticut. Then I worked for Diageo for 15 years, one of the world's largest premium beverage alcohol companies. And then, as you said, I just recently finished my stint at Constellation Brands, also a beverage alcohol company. In fact, one of the top 3 fastest growing companies on the New York Stock Exchange over the last several years. So it's been a great opportunity. I've seen lots of amazing things. I think as an IT professional, as you grow in your journey, you have the opportunity to work in virtually all aspects of IT, whether you're working in them or whether you're accountable for them, from help desk right through to strategic direction setting. And I've been very fortunate to experience not just the great companies, but great leaders along the way. And as I grew in my career, I made a habit out of paying attention to the great, very best leaders and emulating what I saw as the good traits and qualities that they possess. And I'll share in a few moments what I've sort of assessed and digested to the top 10 attributes that I like to bring to the table as a technology leader. But first, I think it's important to recognize that IT professionals, we have the very enviable position of being responsible for providing organizations with technology in virtually every part of the business, right? This is true whether you're making sure that the technology is running day to day, or whether you're doing the biggest and neatest and coolest new technology, and they need you as an IT leader to lead them through that. So when you think about that, people often, in fact, I'd say most frequently, come to IT with a very specific request. I want this report. I want this data. I want this application, right? And I found early on the trick is to actually listen very carefully to what they're actually asking for, right? And then over-deliver. So when they ask for a report, I wouldn't just give them a report. I would give them the ability to run that report without my help anytime that they wanted to, putting the variables in that they needed to. So you over-deliver. If they asked for data, and I knew that data was going to be brought into a spreadsheet, I would build for them a spreadsheet with an ODBC so they can go and get that data anytime they needed it, right? So, of course, we're going back into the days, most of this is back in Hartford when you were working on mainframes, and they needed us desperately. Giving the business what they needed beyond their own expectations, right? That's what they're looking for. So I recognized that, and that's what I focused on. And then I applied this discipline in my approach, and what I found was I created a reputation for myself as being a unique IT professional who could not just get things done, but get things done that were beyond their own expectations. And I attribute a lot of my success to that. But of course, the astute IT professional will know that it takes more than that. To manage your career is more than just delivering. You need to actually be a strong influencer, a strong change manager, a strong boss, a strong employee, right? And to grow as an IT leader, you need to seek opportunities at every junction to understand all aspects of the business, right? Really understand it. You can't over-deliver if you don't understand what the business needs.
What's the career path you chose to become a CIO, And how was that different, or how did you envision it to be different than the traditional path, in years past?
Right. So it's really interesting. I really didn't set out with a specific career path. I didn't spend my time saying what's my next job or what's my next role or how do I grow in the organization. I really focused on how do I deliver beyond what the business needs. I mentioned earlier these 10 things. Always act with integrity. This is true in life and business just the same. Integrity really is what we have. Be true to yourself. Deliver against your promises every time without exception. It doesn't mean you always have to be right. You might promise something and then find out that something is in the way, but go ahead and have that conversation and reestablish the promise. Freely delegate. The hardest thing for me to learn as I was growing up is I don't have to do everything myself, man. You got a team of people around you. Freely delegate, but never, ever delegate your accountability. Responsibility, yes. Accountability, no. Always stay personally accountable. Know what you don't know. We think we need to know everything. Let me tell you something. If you think you need to know everything, you're surely setting yourself up for failure. You can't know everything. Lean into other people. Point 5 is make mistakes. It's okay. We all do make mistakes. Don't make a habit of making mistakes, but make mistakes. And as importantly, allow others to make mistakes. Hold others accountable. You have your accountability. They have theirs. Don't let that slide. It was a hard thing to learn as I grew up into my management piece. You actually have to hold other people accountable. Be gentle but firm. Always be a coach. Make sure every conversation is a coaching conversation, whether you're talking to your boss or to your team or to your colleagues. If there's an opportunity for you and that individual to do better, have that conversation, right? This gets into learning, which I know is really important to Sartor and to all of us. I always try to make the next best decision, not always the right decision, but the next best decision I can make with the information that I have to hand. And then 2 really important things. Make the time to think. We're so fast-paced in this industry, in technology. Nobody takes the time to think. It's why we have the expression, you shot yourself in the foot, because you didn't take time to think. Create the time in your day to think. And the most important of all, remember this. It's going to seem non sequitur, Phil. Family first. We are a whole human being. Right? We talk about work-life balance. If you're not happy at home, how do you expect to be happy in the workplace? So for yourself and for others, make sure that they're getting that balance right. And I think these 10 things, along with my focus on over-delivery, that's the fuel that really drove my career.
So talking about the new strategic CIO versus the tactical CIO. So in the old days, or previous days, communicating to the business about what the value of IT is was pretty much, your systems are up and running. If you have problems with telephony, give me a call. Today, it's very different. Every company today at its core is a technology company. And as a result, the CIO and his team need to collaborate, focusing on business outcomes. So it's all about business outcomes. So as you said, you get a requirement, over-deliver. So a lot of CIOs fail to articulate the value proposition from a business context. They provide a value proposition from a technical aspect. So can you share with us how you think about when you communicate to the business in terms of communicating business outcomes and not just technology prowess?
So it's really a great question. I think what I'm seeing right now is more and more stakeholders are enlightened when it comes to understanding the value of IT. Now, IT and technology, and then your own technology organization, those are slightly different things. But everybody understands. You use the words themselves. We'll say it probably a couple times in this interview. Every company is a technology company. Constellation just happens to be a technology company that makes beverage alcohol. Right. We have to think that way. And you always have to be thinking about your value proposition, because the opportunity for technology within an organization is no longer just through its IT organization. It's from every single element of the world you can think of. People are coming in all the time saying, we can do it this way, we can do it that way. Right? But I think the most important thing, if you want to be at that table, having the conversation, helping people to understand the value of your internal IT, you got to start by making sure you get the basics right. Nothing is as frustrating as going into an executive meeting and wanting to have a conversation about some big strategic ideas, some transformational change that you know you can drive, and they want to talk about why the computers are slow or why the printers aren't printing or why the cell phones are old. It drives you insane. So get that stuff right. Help them to understand that what you have is good and working and right fit for the business, and then you can move on to the more strategic things. And one of the things that I found as really helpful in this process, you get a lot of people who think, well, IT is a cost center, right? And then you have all this, how do you treat IT as a profit center? But actually, there's some more fundamental things you can do. IT is a cost center. There is a cost to running your business. If you look at Gartner will tell you 65% of your IT costs should be running the business, and the other 35 should be grow, transform. I say, come on, guys, let's strive to overachieve in that as well. How about 60-40? What about 50-50? But what you need to do is get your business partners squarely in this game with you, right? So oftentimes your IT cost is driven by a demand within the business that actually exceeds what that demand needs to be. I mean, why do you need to have a printer fixed within 4 hours? There's generally 3 or 4 printers within the same walking distance, right? So think about things like that and work with your business to eliminate what you don't really need. And the conversation goes something like this. Every dollar we save in minimizing or eliminating costs to run the business is a dollar that we can transfer into growing and transforming our business. Right. And that's what you need to get business leaders to really think about and to partner with you. And then they'll start to see, hey, wait a minute, this guy's not just thinking about keeping the lights on. This guy's talking about making those lights brighter, about new kinds of lights, right?
So, Joe, that leads into the whole question of if every company at their core is a technology company that just happens to be in the business of, as you mentioned, Constellation brands, beverage and alcohol, or Hershey Foods, they're in the business of selling chocolate, but they understand they're a technology company. Technology is changing at such a rapid pace today, and there are ways to leverage technology in disruptive ways to help change business models of companies so they can become more competitive. So having said that, I know that one of your sweet spots in terms of insights is really understanding how dramatic changes in technology are going to change the way we work and the way we interact in our personal lives. So to get us started in that kind of conversation, talk a little bit more about the way technology is becoming disruptive, not only on the business side, but on the personal side.
Right, life in general. You don't have to look very far, do you? Turn the TV on, turn the radio on to any news station, and you'll hear about Donald Trump's last tweet. Donald Trump, via the use of technology, is disrupting media. Right. It's disrupting communication in ways that nobody ever predicted. Perhaps they should have, but they didn't. Right? Everywhere you go. We have the Russians, I think theoretically anyway, using technology to try and influence our political agenda in the United States. Millennials, they don't communicate the way that we do, right, the prior generations, right? I see my daughters, and they're on their phones, fingers moving faster than I think thumbs can possibly move. And I ask them, what are you doing? And they say, I'm talking to somebody. My response is, you're not talking to anybody. It's changing the way that we do everything in life, everywhere we go. Consumers are demanding personal relationships with the companies who make the products that they love. Every day, I don't know if you're aware of this, 2.5 quintillion bytes of data are created in business and consumers. 25 quintillion. I mean, we can't even fathom the size of that. That's a huge number. So if you think about all the things that are happening that are creating that data, people who are out there aggregating that data, people who are sharing that data, it's just phenomenal. Everything is IP enabled these days. Refrigerators, the vacuum cleaner in my house. I can control the heat in my house, open the garage doors and turn lights on from anywhere in the world with my cell phone, right? I wear clothing that tells me, how well I'm playing tennis, a racket that records the spin of the ball on it, right? So this technology is everywhere. It's changing how we think. It's changing how we act. And if we try to apply the same old processes, the ways of working, the ways of automating, the ways of doing business that we've always done, these new technologies are going to come on, and they're going to completely disrupt us. And I know we'll talk about disruption later, but we're seeing that change already. And as technologists, one of the, as if our jobs weren't hard enough already, worrying about every aspect of the business, we now have to look at all the things that are also outside of our business that could come in to us as a disruptor, either to change how consumers want to interact with us, and we better be ready, or, God forbid, make us irrelevant. And if you look in history, we've seen time and time again, it repeats itself. I'm up here in Western New York. Kodak is a great example, right? Look at IBM. They reinvented themselves, fortunately. But so you got to be really clear, more so than ever. 25 quintillion bytes of data. What does that tell us? Just that alone, let alone the vehicles that we're using to share that. So it's massive, this change. I don't think anybody is able to truly predict how that's going to change our lives. I think what we need to do is recognize that it is, and be very astute and alert and pay very close attention to the next thing that's coming our way.
Yeah, so that's good. So there are a number of relevant technologies today that are at the peak of everybody's interest. So let's talk about a couple of them. So one is IoT, the Internet of Things. So that is one technology that is absolutely changing the way people work and live. So elaborate a little bit on how IoT is really changing everybody's lifestyle from a personal perspective, and how it's helping companies become more competitive.
I like to call it, rather than the Internet of Things, I like to call it the interconnectivity of things. Yeah. Because it's not just a matter of I have a device that's talking up to the cloud and then coming down and talking to another device. It's actually sometimes devices talking to each other. Yeah. Right? Yeah. The total number of IoT connected devices by 2025 is predicted to be 25 billion. 25 billion devices connected. Wow. From a B2B perspective, it's predicted to be 5.4 billion. Right? So you see the business, and then you see all of it, the whole of society, including ourselves. They also predict that companies that are using IoT technologies in their business will be 10% more profitable today than those who don't today. So you got to be there already. The train has left the station. Think about GE. GE is a great case, by the way. GE Digital Twin. What a fantastic concept. They said, hey, with all the artificial intelligence and machine learning, and all the sensors that we have in a physical engine, connecting those through the Internet of Things, the actual engine and the sensors, to a digital twin in a virtual environment, allows us to predict how we can better, faster, and more cheaply maintain the engines. Plus, think about the data they're getting from data mining and big data. Right. BP, they drill underwater, deep underwater. There is no signal there. All right, but they still have sensors in the deepest part of their rig, and those sensors are communicating device to device to device to the surface before it gets to the internet, all interconnected. Right? Smart tattoos. These are cool things, right? Hopefully not permanent, but a tattoo that you can put on a bar when you're walking around the bar. I know this because I'm in beverage alcohol, right? Your tattoo has a scanner on there that they can scan, and you're paying via a tattoo on your arm. Put some more. Just phenomenal how things are changing. Your iPhone is connected. Look, the new version of iPhone recently came out. If you went to the new iOS version, you'll see now that when in your car, it says automatically, if you get a text, hey, I'm driving, I can't answer your text right now. Great from a social standpoint and responsibility standpoint, but also think about that interconnectivity. Or when you park your car and you're in your office building and say, oh, your car is over here. It knows where your car is. The connectivity of those things, the phone to the car via the Bluetooth, and your presence within that car, and then you're disconnected from that car. All these things coming together. I mean, it's just fantastic. So Everything is connected to everything. If there are 25 billion devices connected by 2020 to the Internet of Things, how many IP-enabled devices are out there? Some multiple of that 25 billion. Everything is connected. When I think about manufacturing, what a great opportunity. You know, every penny you shave off a bottle of beer or your widget goes right to the bottom line in profit. And the best way to find out where those opportunities are is to lean into the data that's being created by the devices, the IP-enabled devices, through connectivity of those devices to every other thing. It's fantastic.
So, Joe, that's really interesting. So when you talk about the Internet of Things, I think about also the medical health. And as I'm getting older and others are getting older, you think about the change in medical technology. And the Internet of Things, or the interconnectivity of things, is playing a really big part in changing home health care. So can you talk a little bit about medical technologies and how that's improving the health outcomes of patients?
Right. Actually, we'll start with what I think is really cool. Not patients, but everybody, right? We see the Fitbits and all these devices that measure what we're doing. There are things that actually, you have to put some input, but measure what you eat and how effective that is. I wear a belt when I go to the gym, and I go to the gym and I see the results immediately on my phone, and it's up on the wall, how hard I'm working, what percent of my target heart rate I'm at. I mean, just fantastic. And then later on, I get an analysis of that at home, so I can look into that. How many calories did I burn, et cetera? How much time am I spending in the sweet zone versus too little or too much exercise? From a medical standpoint, probably my favorite is I have a good friend who's in medical devices, and his thing is heart implants. The heart implants are actually connected, so they're always talking back to some central monitoring that allows the central monitoring to understand, what's happening with the heart, and can actually send a directive to the device to maybe change the rhythm of the heart. More technical than I can share that, but you get the concept. I remember it was kind of funny because for certain political figures, they have to disable that Wi-Fi connection because they're afraid somebody might hack into it, right? Very, very cool how things are changing. Sleep monitoring. Sleep is big these days. Everybody's realizing that, hey, we're not sleeping very well as a society, and there are very serious medical ramifications of not sleeping well. And so you put a monitor on, or you wear a CPAP, and all that information is stored and shared back. There's a lot to go in medical, in my opinion. Sharing of information, you have HIPAA laws that are very important that have to be respected, but sharing of that information and big data on top of it can be hugely valuable to our society at large when we figure out how to do that and respect the privacy. But we are seeing an incredible change in understanding about the human body and what are the things we should or shouldn't do to keep ourselves healthier. So, I don't think it's just aging either. I mean, I think young people they're really into this. The millennials are really into monitoring every step they take. Right. This is all going to be great for us. And how that's all going to come together to create this database of health information that targets you as a patient, drug interactions, et cetera, but also how we can target society at large and figure out, well, what are people doing right or wrong that causes them to have healthier or unhealthier lifestyles.
So IoT is going to change the way we live, absolutely. So you hear a lot today about disruptive technologies, quote unquote, whatever that means. People interpret them a little differently. But why are disruptive technologies so important in terms of how we should think about leveraging them?
Right. So I mentioned earlier about the fact that the IT leaders need to be looking not just within their own organizations, but very, very broadly outside of their organizations. What's happening in the technology space, and how might that come in and disrupt what they're doing? We've heard the terminology, disrupt or be disrupted. I think that's really true. And if you want to really understand it, just think for a moment about automated cars. I mean, they're a pretty cool concept, right? The car can drive itself, it's safer, et cetera. There's still lots of questions and legality and whatnot. But let's just think for a moment, because this is happening and this will happen. When automated cars are up and running, there will be implications to completely unrelated areas of life. I heard not that long ago about a prediction. Some 20 million vehicles in and out of New York City in any given day, don't quote me on the 20 million, will drop down to in the tens of thousands. The average wait time for a vehicle, whether it's transporting goods or people, will be about 37 seconds. You can't today get a cab that fast in New York City. And the implications of that will be real estate in New York City will begin to decrease, because people will say, well, I can live outside the city. I can get in and out so fast, and I can work while I'm doing it. I don't have to wait for a vehicle. And so the prediction is that real estate values in the city will lower and real estate values in the surrounding areas will increase. Interesting. Automated cars impacting real estate. Insurance. I believe it was the CEO of Volvo said, when we put our automated cars out, we, Volvo, will insure you. We'll take on the insurance for you. So here's the automated cars impacting the insurance industry. Yeah. The point being, we can't predict where these disruptions are coming from. They're coming, though, and we got to be very careful to watch for them.
So one of the other technologies that people are starting to talk about, is RPA, robotic process automation. Big thing, right? And it's becoming like a new wave. So a lot of people don't really understand what robotic process automation is, or the role of artificial intelligence. So help us understand in layman terms what that means and how it can be used.
Great. So there are really two different things, right? We'll tackle RPA first, then we'll come to AI, which is infinitely more complex. Robotic process automation, RPA, is really a different way of automating manual processes that happen today, right? The implementations I've seen today really don't get into the AI piece of it, but they get into those things that a business spends a lot of time doing that actually a machine can do for them, right? So you might have somebody in your finance organization who's extracting information out of system A, doing some processing of that information in an Excel spreadsheet, and then importing it into system B. You can easily put an RPA on top of that that would mimic what that employee does. The robot will do it more consistently. It will do it faster. It'll do it 24/7 if you wanted to. You can redeploy that individual. It's sort of fixing the problem of how we had to put human resources in where technology wasn't able to automate in the past. I will throw a cautionary note out, though. As RPAs take off, the technologists have to think very carefully about how that technology can help and how that technology can hurt. Read someone. There are some case studies where so they put the RPA in, and something tweaked either in System A or System B, or Microsoft released some bug fixes to Excel, causing that to alter. If it alters big and the thing bumps in the night, thank God. If it alters small and it doesn't bump in the night, you run the risk of doing the long thing unmonitored for a long period of time, and that can have a catastrophic effect. So our ability to govern these RPAs as they go into an organization is really, really important. You got to set that governance up front, otherwise you'll lose the case. Now AI, very different. Artificial intelligence. This is changing now. Like we've been talking about IA since Star Trek, right? IA now, and there's been lots of different attempts and waves. I think IA has now transformed into a very different place, a very real place, where we're going to start to see true artificial intelligence helping us with things like RPA. So they will notice the change in the underpinning technology, and they'll be able to self-correct, as an example. If you want to see a cool story, read about the game Go, right? A 19 by 19 square game. It's very complicated. Very recently, I'm afraid I can't remember who wrote the software, but they use artificial intelligence and deep learning to compete with the best Go players in the world, and won. Now, the fascinating thing about this is there are more possible moves in Go, they say, than there are atoms in the universe. So it is virtually impossible for a machine through brute force to predict what those moves might be and pick the best one. Like when we automated chess, we could. You can't do it. Deep learning and artificial intelligence is using processes that we haven't used before in technology to eliminate the need to look at every possible outcome and still predict the right moves. Very fascinating. And as that evolves, we'll start to see that play into things like RPAs and other areas of life.
I think that's going to be the next real growth area, because from a manufacturing perspective, that's where there's a lot of opportunity. So you know, one of the areas we talked about earlier with technology being at the core of every business, and then the other phenomenon is where companies, or it's not a phenomenon, it's a reality, companies are really focused on unique customer value or creating more of a service culture. You've called it, you know, a service phenomenon. Why is that something that's really exciting from a business perspective and a technologist perspective? And why is that such a huge challenge for many organizations?
As a service first popped up with things like Salesforce.com. They did a great job. One of the things I didn't like about it was they said, well, you're not going to need your IT organization. We can just, you know, we'll do it for you. We'll do it faster. We'll do it cheaper. Not sure whether it was intentional or unintentional, but nothing in an organization sits in isolation from anything else. All technology is connected. So these things have to come together. But as a service is, in fact, the right way to go. It's the right way to go. For all but those pieces of your technology that you believe are strategically relevant or a competitive advantage for you. So think for a moment about the cost it takes a business when they bring a technology in and they customize that technology to reflect the business processes as they've always done them, right? So you buy software off the shelf, because you shouldn't be writing most software these days. And then you spend a ton of time customizing it to do what you want it to do, which typically is what you think it should do because it's the way you've always done it. And then every time that piece of software has an update or a patch, you got to figure out whether the things that you customized are impacted. It just costs you more. It takes you longer. Very expensive way of operating. When you get into an as a service arena, particularly multi-tenanted as a service, where everybody is doing the same things, you just have a skin or a branding that is yours, you are bound to adhere to the processes as provided by the as a service provider. I love this, and particularly with things like finance. Maybe not so much with sales and marketing. Those can be unique. Finance, HR, legal. A transaction is a transaction. So as a service really helps you to streamline and change your business processes to make sure that they are the most effective and efficient. And once you've made that leap, the as a service provider takes care of all of the rest for you. You still have to worry about interfaces in it now. But that was just software, right? Then we have platform as a service. And you have, you know, this open source technology that everybody can lean to. And now you have infrastructure as a service. You know, for example, Amazon Web Services. So organizations are very, very quickly going to get to the point where they don't need to have a real infrastructure. That's brilliant. The cost of infrastructure, the maintenance of that infrastructure, that's really a big cost for the company. That allows the organization at large, led by IT in many cases, to start focusing on those things that are truly driving competitive advantage for your company, or truly driving growth for your company. It is a huge opportunity. It's a challenge, though. The longer your company has been in existence, the more assets you have in place, the harder it is to move everything from this big, you know, data center way of operating into the cloud. But you have to do it.
Right.
Not to mention your depreciation impact. If you haven't depreciated all those assets, you got a depreciation finance guys. But we have to get there.
Right.
And when we talk about data, when you talk about, you know, trillions of bytes of data a day, no organization can or should have the capacity to manage that stuff. It's out there in the cloud already. Go exploit it, use it, get into the cloud, zero infrastructure, all as a service. It's the way to go.
I'm going to ask you an advice question for CIOs or CIO wannabes in terms of how do they develop a strategy to communicate the importance of including information and technology as a strategy as part of a business enterprise, so they become more of a true member of the C-suite as opposed to just being, hey, he's the technology guy. Yeah. So what's your advice?
Yeah, I think this is particularly meaningful for those companies that are non-technology companies like CPGs and other service providers. You've heard the expression, need to earn a seat at the table. Well, I think sometimes you just have to go to the table and sit down without an invite, right? You got to get these people to understand. No organization will sustain itself, let alone grow, and this is a certainty, without the proper use of technology, the new use of technology, paying attention to the data that's coming our way, and the disruptive technologies. Lately, as we said earlier, we've been hearing everybody say, every company is a technology company that just happens to, and then they talk about what that company does. We talked about Hershey and the others. I believe this is actually true. You have to be there. I think most companies are already including technology in their strategies. I have seen a lot of companies that don't really have a strategy, much below a vision and a mission. And IT is a perfect organization to help these organizations or functions create a strategy. But when you put that together, very few people are putting strategies together that don't at least start to think about technology. The problem is they think about technology within the myopic view of their function, right? And we know the technology has to hang together, right? You can't have a sales function selling products that the finance department doesn't really understand what those products are all about, right? Or that the manufacturing group doesn't know how to make to the right specification. So it's all very, very tightly connected. So our job becomes the way of helping the organization see how all this hangs together as a strategic asset collectively for the organization. And the very best way I've seen to do this, now let's be clear, this is really hard to do, but it's essential, is you build first a business process architecture, right? You map out, if you can in conjunction with your colleagues around the business, a depiction of all the processes that the company does on a daily basis. And this is where you are talking to finance and sales or marketing and HR. You bring to the table the interconnectivity of those processes to help them understand it. But it's really about processes, and therefore it should actually be non-contentious for them. Yes, that's what we do.
Right.
As an IT group, then what you do is you overlay on top of that a 2B information and technology architecture. So you're saying, when we're talking about this business process, here's the technology we should be using. Here's the information we consume. Here's the information we create. And if you have that for an organization, as they put their strategy together, you simply go to the table and say, hey, you're talking about this business process. Let's integrate our business process architecture, our application overlay, and our data in and out.
Right.
And what you find is that you've got them already because you're already anticipating and answering the questions they haven't yet asked, but they know they have to ask. If you're really good, you build your business process technology overlay with the 2B technology in mind so that your business processes emulate as closely as possible what comes out of the box already pre-delivered. And what you get out of that is the ability to very, very quickly deliver any implementation because you're basically delivering what's out of the box. It comes down to data cleansing. I mean, it's still very hard, but it's probably twice as fast. And you start to do that a couple times, and they're going to be clamoring for you to come and do it with them because you're going to be delivering what they need faster and cheaper than they ever thought possible. And you will bypass this external influence of folks like Salesforce and Workday and others coming and saying, oh, let's use this bolt-on, easily bolt-onable technology. You know it's not easily bolt-onable.
Right.
So that's the way you get yourself into that conversation. They will see you as your strategic partner. And the last thing I'll say about it is you can't do this as a CIO alone, right? You've got to bring your team to that place. You've got to empower them, excite them, encourage them, say, guys, this is what we're about. shift some of them from reactive order takers into proactive strategists, right? And you can't be nasty about it and say, this is the way we're going to do it. You got to tell them and say, hey, I think I have the solution already. Let's test it. Let's, put it on the wall and kick the tires of it and see if it works. And very quickly you'll find out that it does. And if you do it in the right way, you've built a very cogent, very well connected business process architecture, application overlay, and that is the formulation for any department's strategy. Very simply done. It's not an IT strategy.
It's a business
strategy. Not a business strategy. It's a business technology strategy.
Yeah, the only thing I would add, I think you alluded to it, is when you talked earlier about that the CIO can't do it alone and he needs people that are not only good technologists, but also people who really understand and speak the language of the business. Yes. So part of it is this business competency, skill, acumen that CIOs need to assess and understand what areas need to be improved.
Very, very important.
Right.
If you can't bridge that gap, if you're talking bits and bytes,
right,
you've lost them already. You got to talk their language.
Right. Okay.
They don't need to know the rest, right? We create simplicity from chaos for them. They don't need to understand the bits and bytes. Right? You got a team to do that. You got yourself to do that. Talk to them in business. What are you going to automate? What are the outcomes? What's going to be different? What business process change do they need to go through? Don't worry about this technology and the interfaces and the data storage and that'll all come to pass. Yeah. Trust yourself and your team on that bit.
Joe, I really, really want to thank you for your insights. I think CIOs, CXOs, wannabe CXOs are really going to gain some valuable information and insights from what you have been able to share. So to our audience, I want to thank you for joining this segment of Sartor TV, and we'll look forward to future segments as well. Thank you.